So why is it that many freelancers never reach the six-figure mark with their business? I'm willing to bet if you're a freelancer making under six figures right now, that you're asking yourself this question. And you know it's not because you're lazy. And I know it's likely not because you're bad at your craft. But you also want to consider that there are many people who are doing exactly what you're doing, who are meeting or exceeding their income goals. So why hasn't that happened for you yet? So after building a multiple six-figure income myself for several years now, I've noticed something interesting. The gap in income usually doesn't relate to talents. It relates to habits. Because again, most freelancers aren't failing because they lack skill. They're failing because their actions or sometimes inactions quietly cap their income, often without them realizing it. Let's take a look at some strategies of how we can fix that. So I'm Jennifer. Welcome. Thank you for joining us at the Freelance Shift. I have been freelancing for many decades, and I decided to go all in about 5 years ago now, and I've been able to build a successful freelancing business. I'm here because I want to teach you some of the skills that I've learned over the years to help you save time and earn more money in your freelance business. So thanks again for joining us. Now, one of the biggest differences that I see between freelancers earning $50,000 a year and those earning six figures or multiple six figures is how they think about their work. People who struggle to meet their income goals often approach freelancing like a side project. They wait for motivation to get the next project or build on the project that they have. Basically, they take whatever comes along too without thinking about what really aligns best to helping them achieve their income goals. Additionally, they don't track income. That is a really, really important thing to do, in my opinion. I think that I could do a whole episode on the importance of tracking income. If you're not doing it, start. Make sure you know when the money is coming in and where the money is going out. Another thing is that some freelancers are afraid to raise rates. Now, I think that this is the most difficult one. It's one that I personally struggle with. I don't always get the rate that I desire. But I have learned that you do have to speak up, and that means that you have to get comfortable having a sometimes uncomfortable conversation about your rate. Now, successful freelancers treat their business like a business. They know their numbers. They think about profitability. They think about growing their income. And they invest in moving the business forward, whether that be in tools to help them accomplish their tasks more quickly or more easily. And they also invest in their own learning so that they can become knowledgeable about certain topics related to the business. They make decisions based on long-term goals rather than short-term emotions. Now, you don't need to have a corporation or a big team behind you to think like a business owner. It's a matter of establishing that mindset and ensuring that when establishing the mindset of a successful business owner, that you stop thinking like someone who's just trying this out or someone who thinks that this may not really be a long-term solution for them. So, as I mentioned, almost every freelancer does start out charging less than their worth. I think that this is very common. I know I certainly did. And as I mentioned, sometimes I still do. But ensuring that you're paid for what you're worth is really important, although it does take some time and practice to get there. Getting the rate that you want really is a practice about having that conversation, having that confidence, at least for me. But I know I'm getting better at it, and you will too with some practice. Because what separates high earners from everyone else is often their rates. If you think about if you made $5, $10, $20, $50 more than you're currently making per hour, if you charge an hourly rate, if you multiply that by the number of hours that you often spend on many of these projects, well, we're talking real money. Now, some of you may remember that I told a story and several podcasts ago about a project that I was on where I learned that a fellow freelancer who was working with me doing the exact same role without any real additional experience than I had was making about $25 an hour more than me. So that experience taught me that I needed to evaluate my rate more carefully and maybe initially ask for a little bit more than I thought that I deserved or that the client could afford in their budget. Because as I mentioned, she did not have any more experience or credentials, but she demanded a higher rate. In fact, when I asked her how she was actually able to acquire that rate, she told me that she felt like she was worth it. She's been able to get that rate in the past, so that she basically told herself that she was unwilling to take a lower rate. Now, I don't know if I would personally take that stance, depending on what the rate is, but good for her for standing up for her value, and good for her for being able to negotiate what she was worth. This woman did not lack for work. She was in demand. Now, I know that in many cases you have some of the same concerns that I have. What if the client says no? What if you lose that work? Isn't it better to take a lower rate to guarantee that work than to demand a higher rate and risk losing it? And then it goes to that question of value where sometimes we have that imposter syndrome and we ask ourselves, am I really worth that much? But you have to think about it. I'm based in the US, and here we've had some great inflation gains over the last few years. And my fixed costs for running my household have grown, and I need my freelance income to support those increases. Now, additionally, my experience grows all the time. So that's something to factor in, that as you become more and more experienced, you can often command a greater rate. But some people do keep their rates frozen, and of course that's up to them. But if you're striving for a certain income goal, I would say that it's definitely something that you could consider, that you should really consider having a conversation about your rate if you do feel like it's appropriate and that you do legitimately deserve to be paid a higher rate. Now, you don't need to double your prices overnight. That's probably unrealistic. I know that some people have been able to manage that, but for many of us, it may be smaller and more incremental. But just think about, if you haven't raised your rate in years, you're essentially giving yourself a pay cut every year because of inflation. Now, the second thing that I think is an obstacle for many people is that they spend too much time chasing business rather than actually working income generating business that they have. So I know that we've discussed this before, and I know that some freelancers spend an incredible amount of time cold pitching and hunting for work. And that is time that it may not pay off for you in the future. It may be, I hate to say, a waste of your time, because you're likely learning something from the process, but you're not moving closer to your income goal by doing this. As I've mentioned before, I feel that there are better ways of getting work as a freelancer than cold pitching. Most of my opportunities have come from existing relationships that I have, referrals that I get, and people who overall just remember the quality of work that I did, so that they are open to working with me again or recommending me to someone else. The easiest way to get work is really through someone who knows you or someone connected to someone who does. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't market yourself. Of course, we have to stand up for ourselves and let people know our value and what we do. But it doesn't mean that you should necessarily spend a great deal of time cold pitching and perfecting your portfolio, because people are going to hire people that they trust, and that trust compounds. So working on making the relationships and the gigs that you have the strongest as possible is probably a better strategy. Now, another issue that I see with people not being able to meet their income goals is that they are starting from scratch every single time. If they have a new proposal, they start with a blank page and they take the time to really customize it. If they have a new client, they will, again, start everything from scratch with all new processes, creating things from the beginning. That is not an efficient use of your time. And again, it's going to be spending time working on tasks that really aren't moving you closer to your income goal. People who make 6 figures or above as freelancers definitely reuse some of their content. They have templates, they save emails, they repurpose presentations with relatively easy edits that appear customized to the new client. They automate repetitive tasks. They basically create systems that allow them to deliver high quality work without rebuilding everything over and over again. And with AI, this is becoming more and more possible. You know that I'm a huge advocate of Copilot, and that I believe that when you master Copilot as a freelancer, you are going to really save yourself some time and earn yourself some money, because again, you're not spending a tremendous amount of time recreating the wheel. The goal is not for you to work harder. It's for you to stop doing the same work twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times. This is why I do so many videos on AI and technology systems. This is why I truly feel like I have been able to be successful. Do the relationships matter? Yes, of course they do. That is probably the first reason for the success. But if I had to rank them, I'd probably say that the second reason is that I am very efficient with the technology and very focused on building things and reusing things when I can, when it's appropriate. This is going to save you time and create more earnings for you, because you are be able to have more time with high paying tasks rather than that really low profit administrative work. Another thing that I also see very often is that People become creatures of habit and they don't invest in the new skills that they need like they should. Now, we know that the marketplace changes. We know that there are many changes going on globally right now. I've mentioned AI. AI is obviously a significant one that we all see working its way or already have worked its way into the workplace. And this technology changes fast, along with other technologies that we use. And when this happens, your clients' expectations are often going to change. They're likely to expect that you know how to use these new features and that you have these new skills. But some freelancers continue to do things exactly the way that they did 5 years ago. And then when a client comes to them and asks them about a new feature and they're not familiar with the new feature, then the client may lose a little bit of confidence in asking that particular freelancer to take on a certain gig. That is significant. Now, of course, none of us know everything, but think about your area of expertise and what's really changing and evolving there. And what should you look into that maybe you haven't looked into? Now, with me being predominantly a technology trainer, I have to make sure that I stay on top of programs like Power BI, Copilot. We know AI, really big. Microsoft, really big. So that's important to know. And then things like Power Apps and Power Automate and AI tools, it's really given me an advantage. It's given me somewhat of a niche. There are thousands and thousands of people who do what I do, but having this expertise has really benefited me by having a fairly large bag of tricks. I feel that's only worked to my advantage. And you have to embrace it, but also accept that you're not going to become an expert overnight. However, learning these tools can only create new opportunities for you. I feel like some of my most valuable projects came from skills that I almost said no to learning, and I did inevitably decide to learn. And I know I'll post it below, but there was a podcast where I spoke about a friend of mine who owns a learning company, and he really wanted me to teach a class on Power Platform. And I only knew some of the aspects of Power Platform, so I tried to bow out, but he convinced me that he could work in some prep time, some, professional learning time into the contract, and I could teach myself how to use the software and deliver the presentation. And I did. And inevitably, by the time it ended, I was glad that I did. I don't know if I was happy about it during the whole process, but that's another story. Another issue is that some freelancers who are failing to meet their income goals are focusing on being busy instead of being valuable. Now, a packed calendar can sometimes hide or create problems. If you don't have any time to learn or to grow or to accept opportunities that come along, then that can actually hinder you long term, even though you may have taken on all of the work with good intent, thinking that that would get you closer to your income goals. And sometimes it does. But sometimes there are freelancers who work 60 hours a week who still are failing to meet their income goals. And it's because they're filling their calendar to stay busy with the first thing that comes along instead of being strategic and only adding the things of value to their calendars. So it's really something to consider that your goal isn't to fill every hour, it's to make every hour count and move you closer to the acquisition of achieving your actual income goal. Now, the last one is that oftentimes we want a quick fix, right? They say that, we're the Burger King population, those of you who are in the US, and that you can have it quick and you can have it your way. And of course, social media often does perpetuate this concept with people thinking that if I implement it, it's going to happen tomorrow. They make it look really fast on social media. And when that happens, sometimes you feel like everyone else is winning, but that you're not moving any closer to your goal, or at least not moving as quickly as you want it. And that is definitely something that you want to be aware of, because again, it goes back to that mindset issue that we were talking about, and the issue of mindset. And in this case, I feel like you need to set the goal and be positive in moving toward that goal, rather than think that it's going to be a sudden success. That oftentimes doesn't happen, although it could. It's not quite as common as that intentional, determined action to meet that goal. Now, for me, I was fortunate enough to be successful as soon as I started freelancing full time. But you have to remember that I had been freelancing on the side for almost 20 years before going full time. So for me, the growth wasn't overnight. It was actually gradual. And that all compounds over time, as we've mentioned. So when people ask me, what's the secret to reaching six figures quickly? I honestly respond, I don't think that it's just one thing. I actually think it's a combination of a lot of little boring things that are done consistently over time. And I really do feel that delivering excellent work, continuing your learning, building your relationships, raising your rates, creating systems to help you be more efficient, along with things like protecting your reputation and staying curious, all contribute to the success of moving you toward your financial goals. So be sure to be patient enough and stay in the game long enough for all of those things to compound. So six figures isn't reserved for people with massive audiences or fancy degrees. It's often the result of years of doing simple things well. You don't need to work around the clock, although many of us freelancers do work many, many hours in order to at least initially build a successful business. But you want to strive towards building a business that gets a little better every year. And if you do that consistently, six figures is going to be less of a dream and more of a reality for you. Thanks for listening. I'm going to put some related videos below that will help you out with this topic. Please check them out and see you soon. Bye-bye.